Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. Happy New Year to everyone. Today we have Deena Bosworth and Samantha Gibson from the MAC staff to talk a little bit about what's happened so far this year. So we are about 2 weeks into the 2025 new year. Legislators have met. Some things have been happening. Some things haven't been happening that typically have happened by now. So let's start with that first, Deena. There is a group of bills, I think 9 last we checked, that are kind of hanging in limbo now. What's going on with those?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Steve. Just a little background so members understand. When the previous legislature adjourned sine die in December of 2024, they had a whole host of bills that still had to be presented to the governor. And we're talking well over 100. Those bills, once they are presented to the governor has 14 days down to the hour and the minute to either sign those bills or veto those bills or do nothing with them, and it's called what's called a pocket veto. So almost all of those bills have been presented to the governor. Sorry, almost all those bills have been presented to the governor except for like 9. And one of those 9 bills is that Public Act 152 legislation that we've been working on. Now, typically, they're to the governor before the new legislature is sworn in. Now, the new incoming speaker, Matt Hall, was sworn in last week, and then made a later statement that he was not going to send those remaining 9 bills to the governor for her signature, or her consideration, I should say. What the legal authority is on that, we're not quite sure. We're still trying to figure it out. He may be compelled to do it at some point. It's just when does he actually do that?
Yeah, is it typical for there to be a delay for bills to be presented?
Yes, it is absolutely typical for there to be a delay. You know, we've been around way too many lame duck sessions, more than I want to admit. And we've always seen a huge delay in when the bills get presented to the governor.
Now, have those delays occurred where it's been a new speaker coming in, or are they typically
Usually they're presented,
prior?
usually they're presented prior to the new legislature being sworn in.
So is this an issue with the last legislative session that they didn't present them to the governor potentially?
You're really pushing my memory, Steve. I can't say for sure. I can
Well, I
say
guess my
that this
point
is
is this is kind of unprecedented. We're on unprecedented ground.
that I will admit to, yes, because I've never, ever seen an incoming speaker refuse to send previously passed bills that were ordered enrolled and for presentation to the governor and then not send them. I've seen the chambers hold the bills much longer than they're supposed to, or I shouldn't say supposed to, much longer than normal because they were using it as some sort of negotiation. But
Right.
I've never seen it bleed into the next legislative session.
Right, because there is a shot clock once it is presented to the governor, and then there's a certain amount of time she has to sign them, like we've talked about. But I mean, so right now, I think everyone's looking for a legal opinion, right? We're waiting to get some sort of legal opinion, not us specifically, but the legislature, I think, has asked for a legal opinion, correct?
I don't know that for sure. I don't know who has asked for exactly what. I mean, maybe they have, maybe you know more than I do, but I don't know who has asked for what. I know that, we've been working with other groups trying to figure out what the legal obligations are and the loopholes are. So it remains to be seen.
Yeah. So why is that a concern to us? What bills are in that group?
So what's the only one that's really of concern to the Michigan Association of Counties is the bill that deals with the Publicly Funded Health Insurance Act. And that's that House Bill 6058 or Public Act 152, which is what we refer to it as. And that's the bills that change how much the employer is obligated to pay for employee health care. So Mac was not happy at all with House Bill 6058. We were not happy with how it was drafted, how it went through the process, and how it ultimately ended up. Problem being is that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. We wanted, and MAC as an organization wanted to be able to have employers pay more than they are paying now if they opted for that hard cap, so that limit on how much they could pay for employee health insurance. Because the inflationary mechanism in it was not keeping up with the cost of health insurance rates. And so our employees were being forced to pay more and more and more, and it was really taking a hit on their paycheck. So their cost of living increases were really being eaten up by this. So we wanted to see that hard cap lifted, but they did some other things in the bill that we were not okay with. For those counties that opt for an 80-20 split with their employees, that would have made 80% the floor. So the employees had to pay at least 80%. Huge change from what the legislation was before. And then they also bungled the inflationary mechanism. And what part that didn't work was because it was tied to the medical care component of the CPI, which doesn't reflect pharmaceutical rates, right? We thought, well, just tie it to the increase in the Department of Insurance and Financial Services approved insurance rates, their increases, right? Tie it to that. That makes sense. Part of the small group market makes sense for everybody else. That's a great inflationary mechanism. Instead, the legislature said, no, it's the medical care component of the insurance rates, which are not reported separately. So there's no real way of calculating it. So the bill is pretty much a mess. That's one of the bills that has not been presented to the governor yet.
So we're still waiting to see on that, and did ask for a veto on that because of those reasons that you mentioned. Because of course one of the huge drivers of medical insurance is pharmaceutical rates and the cost of pharmaceuticals, and if those aren't being reflected in those rates, that inflationary number is going to be drastically underestimated in those numbers. So I think that does make sense, and recognizing there needs to be some flexibility on the county's end to adjust their side of the equation for payment to compensate their employees if they want to, right? I mean, it's again a local control decision. So I guess we'll wait and see on that, see what the new Speaker Hall does with those bills, if he's compelled to at some point present them to the governor, and we'll see what the governor does, right?
Like I said, I've never seen this before, but it's fun to watch.
A lot of things we haven't seen before in the past, month.
Right.
It's
Oh, there's another one we haven't seen before. Are you jumping to that, Steve?
Well, yeah, we can go to that too. Let's talk committee assignments. Sam, you can chime in on this one if you'd like. So we have committee assignments presented by the new speaker. Let's talk a little bit about what we saw and what we haven't seen.
Well, much to our dismay, at least for now, could prove to not be, so burdensome, but in the incoming term, there will not be a House local government committee, which is something to my understanding that hasn't been done before. I'm getting some affirming nods, so okay,
I would
good.
agree.
I've never seen it happen before where we didn't have a local government committee.
So I think, and you read this in our LU, typically most of our issues do go through the House Local Government Committee. Obviously, we spend a lot of time in judiciary and criminal justice and transportation and whatnot, but the House Local Government Committee has been a long-standing platform for local governments to use in the House. So it'll be different this term, kind of running around all over the place to all these different committees. I think the sentiment around removing it is that the Speaker Hall wants the committees that our bills go to, those members to be, tax policy experts, transportation experts, you name it, they can look at it through that specific policy lens. So I don't know. Deena, what do you think going into this term?
Do you want my honest opinion? I'm more than a little bit concerned. I mean, there are several issues that always went through local government committee that don't really belong in some of the other policy committees. If you take issues like Open Meetings Act or zoning issues, Local control issues are really important. And we've seen local government committee memberships, the legislators that are on there usually have local government background and they understand the plight that local governments go through to try and, you know, provide all the services that they have to provide. If our bills are going to committees that are really focused on business attraction, and that is really where their expertise lies, they're not necessarily going to be concerned with how those are zoned in a local community or what those communities, you know, think about what's happening. If it's going to go to tax policy and they want to give property tax breaks to businesses as an incentive, they're not necessarily thinking about how you balance a local government budget, a county budget. And so without the local government committee, or at least significant local government representation on these committees, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, and we haven't seen committees, members named on committees yet. I don't think that's been announced yet, except for the one special committee on earned paid sick time. I think they have announced that one, but we can talk about that in a minute. So I think the concern is, I mean, there's going to be a lot more education, right, depending on what committee our bills go to, on those local government county specific issues. We're going to be educating members a lot more than those members that maybe have a background in some sort of local government. And it's going to probably be spread out across a bunch of committees now, you know, which makes things a little bit challenging too. So I guess we'll wait to see where things fall out. But one thing we did see is a creation of some subcommittees, right, that we haven't seen before. So we've lost some committees, we've added some committees. Let's talk a little bit about those subcommittees that were created.
I can talk a little bit about it. So the House Oversight Committee was usually the committee where bills went to either die, like they were never going to be taken up, so it was a graveyard, or they were bills that were introduced and they were immediately going to move them. So they would send them to the Oversight Committee and then kick them right out. Well, now we've got subcommittees. But 6, Sam, was there 6 subcommittees?
5 or 6.
5 or
6 sounds
6?
right.
Up
Yeah.
there? And they've been given blanket subpoena power. And what that means, and I've seen subpoena power in committees before, so it doesn't surprise me, but they will be able to compel the departments and the employees to come and testify and, you know, really do a lot more investigation. Shocking that they've got blanket subpoena power. I only remember it a couple of times before. And those were under, you know, some pretty targeted circumstances. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, these
but-
committees were, you know, potentially created to kind of be oversight of the administration, right? I mean, that's how that could be interpreted.
Exactly. And now they have all the tools they could possibly want to do it.
Yeah, so that's an interesting move early in the administration, you know, by Speaker Hall. You know, so we'll see how that kicks things off with the administration and the relationship there. Of course, you know, with the new makeup, you know, having one chamber Democrat, one chamber Republican, and the Democrat governor. In order to get things done, there's going to have to be collaboration at some point, and there's still some major issues out there. I think both chambers want to get done. You know, road funding being one, but the other one being earned sick time, paid leave. So let's talk a little bit about that, Deena. We've got bills introduced. We've got a subcommittee created. Tell us a little bit about how the bills are differing or similar, and what we're hearing as far as that package is going.
Yeah, so there were 2 bills introduced, the very first 2 bills introduced to the Michigan House. The first one was to amend the minimum wage, and the second one was to amend the Earned Sick Time Act. We have similar bills, definitely not the same. Similar bills in the Senate, Senate Bills 8 and then Senate Bill 15, I believe it is. The House bills have been scheduled for hearings already this week. And we knew that was going to happen. We knew that was going to be their House Republican #1 priority starting this legislative session. It was the reason they walked out during lame duck on December 13th and didn't come back. They're very, very concerned about what this means for employers across the state. So they've got, like I said, the two bills. The minimum wage bill would scale back a little bit what minimum wage would be starting February 21st of this year, and then increase it by 50 cents a year until 2030. Really only scaled it back by maybe 48 cents per hour. But it'll be $12. If this goes through, it'll be $12 an hour. What they did do was get rid of that tip credit. So I know I've heard from many of our members, even though it's not a county issue, I've heard from many of our members that they're very concerned about their restaurants in their counties and what that means for the restaurant owners, the viability of the business, and what it means for those tipped employees. So what they did in the House bill was they completely got rid of that tip credit, which don't be confused by that. That just means that we're going back to the way the current law works. So current law is your tipped employees get paid 38% of the state's minimum wage so that they can earn those tips and keep those tips and have the right to share them with the other restaurant workers if they want. In the law where it is now, the employers, that tip credit would have changed so that they would have gotten less and less of a credit and had to pay their employees more and more and more and more. And as the general public got used to that, the thinking is that tips would go down, how much money a tipped employee makes would eventually go down. And it would be a bigger burden on that restaurant industry. So that's, first of all, the minimum wage bill. The Earned Sick Time Act bill, the House Bill 4002, makes significant changes to that Earned Sick Time Act. It really says, if they have to accrue 72 hours of sick time, they can accrue a maximum of 72 hours. That the rollover could only be for that maximum of 72 hours unless they get it paid out, which wasn't an option before. Because I know many employers pay out their sick time at the end of the year, so they're not carrying that liability going forward. They changed the definition of employer to an employer with 50 or more employees, not just any employer. They significantly scaled back earned sick time for part-time workers. And this is pretty much all the amendments and changes that the business industry was looking for, while still keeping it fair. Well, and that's, I suppose, a judgment call, but significantly scales it back. Makes it a little more workable. And many of those provisions our counties have wanted to see changed anyway.
Yeah, so both bills, both packages have been introduced in each chamber. The House has created a special committee to work on this issue. The Senate, we haven't heard much on, right?
Not yet. But I do believe they're going to make some changes before these laws go into effect on February 21st, because you see two different versions in the House and the Senate, and it being a number one priority. Hopefully they get, something done that cleans it up and makes it better for everybody to be able to administer it. And that would set a positive tone, I suppose, for this legislative session with split power.
Well, it's going to force everyone to come to the table if they want to get something done, right? And that's early in the session to do that, which is, like you said, probably a good thing to get everyone in the same room working towards some sort of goal, even though they may have different goals. But not a lot of time to do that too. So they're under the gun. It's not like there's a limited amount of time. If they want to fix it by the implementation date, it's going to have to move, and it's going to have to move quickly. So that might be a good thing too, if we're looking for, a good working relationship going for at least the short term. So more committee talk. We've got our internal policy committees. We're accepting applications now, correct, Sam, Deena?
Yes. So a couple of changes to our internal committees. We are combining our Agriculture and Tourism Committee with our Environmental and Natural Resources Committee. And then I will be heading that one up. Now, as I'm sure everyone knows, Madeline Fada moved on to a different position in Lansing. She's no longer with MAC, so Sam and I are going to split committees. So I will have Finance and General Government, and then I will also have the combined committee of environment, natural resources, agriculture, and tourism. Sam, you want to talk a little bit about yours?
Yes, thank you. I'll continue overseeing the judiciary and public safety and health and human services committees. And then I'll also have our transportation and infrastructure committee moving forward.
That's great.
Yeah,
So,
great. And those applications, we're taking applications now till the 31st, correct?
yes, we're hoping to get committees started in February. So the deadline for committee applications is January 31st. It might be a quick turnaround time for that first meeting in January, which is finance and general government. But we should be able to get notifications out, hopefully, by Monday or Tuesday of the following week after the deadline, and let you know what committees are, when they meet, Zoom links to participate. But we do encourage all of our membership to at least, try and attend, or at least someone from your county attend at least one of our committee meetings.
Yeah, and those typically meet once a month. They'll meet from February till May, June-ish, at which point in time they'll be working on platforms at some point in time in there, get them approved so our board can approve them. Then those platforms will go to the membership for the annual conference in September, October timeframe. So that's kind of the cadence they normally run. And then they take summer off, get back together again, starting in September through the end of the year. But we don't want to start talking about September already. We just got through the new year. So that's
September is warmer.
it certainly is. It is. We're in the thick of it right now. Well, I think that's all the topics I had. Did you guys have anything I might have missed? No?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We will be back probably next week, but if not, it might be a couple weeks and we'll give another update. So thanks everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.